Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On the podcast, we talk about all things to increase muscle performance, improve body composition, do all of it in a flexible framework without destroying your health. Today on the podcast, we've got the great Anthony Castore, and we're talking all about the crazy world of peptides. And this goes without saying that this is not medical advice. This is for entertainment purpose only. Always consult your physician. All those standard caveats. These compounds are for your pet rat. But it seems like you can't look anywhere on the internet, or maybe it's just my crazy Instagram feed, without seeing people talk about peptides and different aspects of them. And there is some good information there, but I would say a lot of it I don't really trust. So the reason I wanted to get Anthony on here is that he has been working with peptides for quite some time, both on himself and with many clients. And as we talk about in the podcast, there is some research on these compounds, but there's definitely not a ton of research on the human use aspect of them. And until we get more research, which hopefully there will be more coming at some point, if I'm trying to remain optimistic, in the meantime, you're left with this void where it's more clinician experience in what they've used and what they have tried. Again, this is not necessarily medical advice, but I believe that if people are going to make different decisions, that you should be as educated as humanly possible about those decisions, so that everything will hopefully go more in the right direction. That's why I wanted to get Anthony on here, and we talk about a ton of different things in addition to just peptides and bioregulators. We talk a little bit about what exactly are peptides and how they are helpful for the immune system. We even get into ketone esters and some benefits from them, NAD supplements and alternatives, benefits of carbohydrates, even just general training performance. He also talks about some experience he's had with the zeolites and detoxification, hydration, how do you pick a quality peptide source, and a ton of other stuff. And then if you want to get more in-depth information, we've got the Flex 4. We'll put a link down below. This will also put you on the daily newsletter list. But the question I asked Anthony there is, what would be on your checklist? What are the questions you definitely want to ask these different companies that are making peptides? What is the best thing you should know before using them? So that one you can find at the Flex 4 question. You can download the little link below, just put in your email, and will be sent to you directly. If you're already on the fitness newsletter insider list, you will get this sent to you automatically. So that part is not in the podcast. It is for subscribers only, but it's free to subscribe, so we don't charge you anything to do that. And then our sponsors today, we've got Teton, talking about ketone esters. That is my biased personal favorite ketone ester. I'm recording this down from South Padre, Texas here, so I've been using a fair amount of them between kiteboarding sessions, and I find that it seems to help, but definitely with recovery, and especially more on the brain fatigue side. If I'm out for 2.5 hours like I was the other day, it's crazy gusty wind, flying a new kite I was demoing from a buddy, and my brain was cooked after about like 2.5 hours, and took a small break, had some food, and I had 2 ketone esters and went back out and rode again in the evening session. Felt pretty good. So check them out below. We'll have a link. And then I am a scientific advisor to them and an ambassador in terms of full disclosure on that. Also, we've got electrolytes from Element. I was also using that. It was crazy hot down here, and you also forget how much water loss you have, especially being out in the water or in the wind. And I ended up having 4 packets of Element yesterday. Welcome to the podcast, Anthony. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And today we're all about peptides, which it seems like they're everywhere now. Like I can't go on Instagram without being hit in the face with crazy training things about hypertrophy, PEDs, and peptides, it seems, but maybe that's just my feed.
No, I would agree. There's really been a surge in popularity in peptides over feels like probably about the last 4, maybe 5 years. And fascinating area. Really a lot of cool stuff going on, and I'm excited to unpack some of that with you.
Yeah. Why do you think there is more of an upturn in peptides? Do you think it's an education thing? Do you think there's more newer ones out, there's more experience? Or I'm always curious why some things are, I don't want to say trendy, but I guess for maybe a lack of a better word.
I think that, in my opinion, a lot of the surge started with all of us meatheads. We accumulate the injuries, and
Mm-hmm.
you hear about your friend who had the shoulder injury and took some BPC and Thymosin Beta-4 and healed up in miraculous time. And I think those type of anecdotes really start to spark some interest, and people start digging. And the accessibility too. 10 years ago, there was maybe 1, 2 places that had them available, and now it seems like you can pop over to Amazon. I wouldn't recommend that at all, but
I wouldn't either.
no, you can. They're all over the place. So I think accessibility, as well as just a little more awareness of how applicable they are in so many situations.
Yeah, I first heard of them. God, it's got to be over maybe 10 or 12 years ago now from my buddy Carl Lenore. We used to run Superhuman Radio.
Oh yeah.
And the first time I heard about it, I was like, oh, wait a minute, what is he talking about? A peptide? Like, it's not a steroid, it's not a supplement. And at the time, he's like, oh, it's these research chemicals. I'm like, oh, this sounds shady as hell. That was like my first response. And now there's a lot more data and more use. So for listeners, just define what is a peptide, what are the normal routes of administration, and just the basic 101 rundown.
Sure. Yeah. So when we think about a peptide, peptide is just going to be two amino acids joined together, peptide bond up to, I think currently it's 50 amino acids is considered a peptide. If it's a longer chain than that, it becomes polypeptide. Some examples of peptides that are going to ring a bell for people would be like insulin. That was probably the first commercially available peptide. The growth
Which is a
hormone we
massive
make.
breakthrough when they could actually create insulin in a lab was a huge breakthrough in terms of medical science.
Unbelievable, yeah. And the growth hormone we make, 191 amino acids, that would be considered like a polypeptide. But when we're differentiating between like a bioregulator peptide versus a regular peptide, bioregulators are going to be 2 to 4 amino acids. And a good way to think about it, these chains are so small. Like I'm a short guy, so when I play hide and seek, I got all the hiding spaces available. These peptides are like me playing hide and go seek. They can sneak into those spots on the DNA and create epigenetic changes. So those are generally going to be things that are applicable for organ systems, that sort of stuff. Peptides in general, when we think about some of the longer chain peptides, like a BPC-157, most of those are going to do their signaling on the cell surface or in the mitochondria. And those are more just sending a message and those cells communicate.
Very cool. And so bioregulators, you said, are actually smaller, correct me if I'm wrong, smaller peptide chains, and they appear to be acting on the epigenome. So in essence, they're turning on portions of the DNA to have them make a protein or do something. Do you want to explain what the epigenome is? Because that might be new to people. They've heard of the genome and DNA, but epigenetics and epigenome might be new.
Sure. So, a real easy explanation when we think about our DNA, it's just this long code of information. And the epigenome is going to be how that information expresses. So, for example, I might carry a gene for, I don't know, carry a gene for Alzheimer's. But whether that expresses or not is going to have to do with stimulus that would come in from the environment or other things. So, when we talk about epigenetics, it's like a light switch that can be turned on or off and how that gene expresses. So the bioregulators have the ability to bring out expressions in genes.
Very cool. The first time I heard about this was, I think it was Bruce Lipton's book, of The Biology of Belief, when it first came out. And I remember looking at it going, what the hell is this guy talking about? This seems like Looney Tune stuff. And then as years and years go by, I'm like, oh, I think he was more right than wrong. I don't agree with everything in there. And then you start looking at, so some of the mouse studies they did where they changed the fur color to try to determine that some epigenetic changes are actually inheritable through a couple generations. You can look at like some of the famine studies that have been done over in Europe, and we find that some of these epigenetic things were triggered and that they stay around for sometimes a couple generations also, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's really amazing how some of this gene stuff can be passed through generations. When we think about the bioregulators, a lot of the research dates back to in Russia on the nuclear submarines. They
Hmm.
had the workers that would go out and military invests a large amount of money in the training of these people. And after 6 months on these nuclear submarines, they'd come back looking like they'd aged 6 years. And you can imagine, and it's expensive as well as problematic when they have these people aging at an accelerated rate and they have to constantly train new people. So Professor Vladimir Kevinson was commissioned to study this population and see what can we do to put the brakes on the aging and help some of these things that are occurring regress, or at the very least put the brakes on them. His research led to the bioregulator peptides, several protocols. The one people are probably most familiar with would be like the epitalin. And epitalin's the one that prevents the degradation of the telomeres. And when we think about telomeres, and this kind of ties into our discussion on DNA, real good visual is if you look down at your shoes, the shoelaces, and the little plastic part around the end, your DNA would be the shoelace, and then that plastic part around the end is the telomere that protects it. And if you've got a cat like I do, they're going to chew up the end of that shoelace, which would be like our telomere going bad. And just like a shoelace, you know how it spreads apart and you see all these strings all over the place. Now, when we go to replicate that DNA, some of it might not be transcribed accurately, or perhaps even not at all. And when we have that telomere in place to protect it, in theory, we're going to be able to transcribe DNA more accurately and prevent those breaks in the DNA that lead to things being expressed that we wouldn't want to have expressed.
Is I think wasn't there supposedly like a limit to how much that can be like was it the Hayflick limit? Was it the limits of like how much you can was it replicate or change? And then I think there's newer things showing that the shoelace portion, if we use your analogy, that's not a predetermined destiny. Like I think the old theory was it just keeps degrading over your life, and at the end you're just effed. But now I think we can rebuild back some of that little plastic coating, correct?
Yeah, I think that the research is always changing, but I think to your point, they're showing you can rebuild that plastic coating back. The really interesting thing in terms of when we look at aging is that study they're doing at Stanford, the Buck Institute, with identifying all the different immune factors. And I think that's really going to be what gives us that accurate sense of how we're aging and the targets that we need to focus on to age better or slow the process.
Yeah, tell us more about that. You said I'm not familiar with that one. They're looking at different immune functions, is that right?
Yeah, I think, and I just found out about this about a month ago, so
Hmm.
I'm not as versed in it as I should be, but my understanding is there's something like 10,000 immunomarkers they identified.
Oof.
And yeah,
Simple
um,
problem.
yeah, no problem. Just bust right through that this
Yeah.
afternoon. And that aging essentially is, we think of it as a disease process. In fact, something that'll really tie this together, make sense, and I think resonate with a lot of athletes. Sure, you've heard people talking about their joints wearing down over
Mhm.
time. And in fact, that's when the immune system is dysregulated. What's happening is like if we get an acute injury and let's say a little fragment of our cartilage ends up in our bloodstream, as it's circulating, our body starts to react to that. It creates this
Mm.
inflammatory process. And we develop an intolerance to our own collagen, which is 40% of the protein in our body, and that inflammation creates more breakdown of cartilage. So it's this vicious cycle. And when we think about, well, what can we do to stop this? That's a perfect example of where peptides can come in. Using like a native type 2 collagen, we can start to reestablish that immune tolerance. And then we
Hmm.
can use things like a BPC-157 that's going to reduce some of the inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, NFKB, and BPC with thymosin beta-4. Those are going to help align our collagen fibers so they go in that nice straight line as we're rebuilding. The thymosin beta-4 also helps to prevent fibrosis and helps with proliferation of satellite cells to that area. So between the two of those, there's really a lot of synergy. And then throwing in something like not a peptide, but pentasen polysulfate, which is made from the cell walls of plants, actually regenerates cartilage. And there were some studies done in Australia on that. Really cool. Within 6 months on an MRI, you can actually see
Really?
cartilage regrowth. Yep. And additionally, this pentacin, it should be in the drinking water if you ask me. It works as a prebiotic, so it creates a favorable microbiome atmosphere. It reduces all the inflammatory cytokines and things that are associated with arthritis. It can regenerate cartilage. So yeah, just a simple example of how aging that we think of as just something that happens is really a regression or miscommunication from the immune system, how that does, in fact, then break down our joints and how peptides can come to the rescue and put them back together.
Well, that's fascinating. And say the name of that one again. And is it oral and is it an over the counter or do you have to find it on different sites or tell us more about that? Because I think especially this is most of this podcast is shamelessly for my own information too. But as someone who is getting a little bit older, still doing snowboarding, probably pounding the crap out of my knees a little bit too much from airs, kiteboarding, and landing shit I probably shouldn't land. Like, sounds fascinating.
No, absolutely. So pentasen polysulfate, that's Pentosan polysulfate. And it's available orally as comes as a tablet, but for the benefits for like joint health and everything, inject is going to be a lot more effective.
Okay.
And
Inject into the joint area.
actually intramuscular twice a week,
Okay.
125 milligrams. And it's also available as a injection. They've been using it in veterinary medicine for, gosh, probably 50 years, but recently started studying it in humans. The best source for it would be a compounding pharmacy. Doctor could call that in, no problem. It's not a controlled substance or anything.
Very cool.
And yeah, it helps with like TGF beta stimulation for the tissue repair, reduces like the nuclear factor kappa beta. It helps with the heparin sulfate signaling. So it has those anti-fibrotic properties and it upregulates the VEGF and TGF beta for the cartilage repair. So it
Oh,
really has
interesting.
cool properties. Yeah.
Huh. So do you think that you're just getting more potentially blood flow and stuff to tissue that tends to be very avascular, so you're getting more nutrients and everything else along the way?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it. And then the effects that it has on the microbiome, I think also, and they haven't really been able to parse out the specifics of that, but I feel like the microbiome and the metabolites they create have a lot to do with things, and that's definitely got to play some role. It also downregulates the MMPs, which are going to be that's another important thing in terms of putting out that inflammatory fire that goes on when we have these joint problems.
Yeah, explain what those are.
So those are the outside of the cell, the that matrix. I'm trying to think of how to explain it. Yeah, basically it's extracellular inflammatory factors.
Yeah, that works. And with the microbiome effects, is that from the IM injection or is that only from the oral injection or are they
Both
different?
both of them would have it. The oral
Hmm.
might even have a little bit better microbiome effect. And when we think about like what pentasen polysulfate is, how it comes from the cell walls of plants, It's essentially like almost like a type, it's closer to a sugar than an amino acid, so it's going to feed the microbiome.
That's cool. Yeah, the best example I ever, or definition of the immune system I heard was from, I'll think of his name. Anyway, but he was saying that it was your cells are all going around saying self, not self, not self, not self. Like they're always trying to figure out, oh, is this little guy, should he be here? And is he okay? Or, oops, this is an invader. We need to attack this person and get it out of there. And obviously, that's different per location. And that's the theory of why some people have autoimmune diseases where their self starts realizing it can't identify that, oh no, that was part of your tissue. It's getting an error in that signal. And so it says, nope, nope, this is bad, even though it starts attacking good tissue at that point.
Yeah, that's a perfect description. And in fact, that
I got that
brings
from
up
Tom
another.
Myers. I knew I'd think of his name.
Oh yeah, the anatomy trains guy. The That brings up another peptide that for I think if you were to throw me on a deserted island, tell me I can take three things with me, it's going to be this thymosin alpha 1, ketone ester, beta hydroxybutyrate, and zeolite.
Oh,
S-
tell us about
So,
this. I haven't heard people mention VHB and zeolites for quite a while. So tell me about the other ones first. I'm excited.
absolutely. So you want me to start with the zeolites and the BHB or the?
No, start with your list from the top.
Sure. So the thymosin alpha 1, it regulates your T cell response and it does what's called immune surveillance. So
Hmm.
exactly like what you're talking about when we're going around saying this cell's good, this cell's bad. TA1 is like this spaceship kind of hovering all through our body and identifying the targets for our immune system to go after. And when you think about something like chemotherapy, you can use TA1 in conjunction with chemotherapy and it targets the chemotherapy to the cancer cells. So for general health purposes, it's really good. I personally take it year round with travel and everything, helps to keep you from getting sick. And when you think about one of the rate limiting factors for hypertrophy response is going to be when your immune system takes that hit. Great way to keep your immune system modulated to the proper level of alarm where it's not overreacting or underreacting. So yeah, big believer in
Hmm.
that.
And what's a common dose? And is it oral, injectable?
So that one would be injectable, and the common dose on that ranges anywhere from 500 micrograms once every 2 days to I personally take a milligram a day.
That's pretty high.
So
You
it's
go from micro to milli.
i- it's a really large variety in there. The When you calculate the dose on it, it's unusual. It's done by centimeters squared,
Centimeters
and
squared?
yeah, it's the only peptide I'm aware
Huh.
that uses that calculation. Usually it's going to be a body weight
Yeah.
calculation.
So it must be body
Um,
surface area somehow then, huh?
yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
I'll circle back and get the formula
Yeah,
to
no,
you
I
so
was
you
just
can put it in
curious.
the
That's
show notes.
interesting.
But yeah, really interesting. And then the other two that I'm a huge fan of are going to be the beta hydroxybutyrate ketone ester. And I'm not paid by the company or anything, but I'm adamant with my clients about only using the ketone aid. And the reason for that, when you look at how they get metabolized and everything, the end product that you finish with is going to be different. And that beta hydroxybutyrate ester, when it breaks apart, that butyrate in there helps to do things like inhibit histone deacetylase and help our microbiome. Some other benefits to it, like when we think about these ketone esters and why they're so amazing, they reduce oxidative stress, neuroprotective, they help with metabolic flexibility and increasing ATP production. They upregulate PGC1 alpha. They work on stress resistance, particularly like sirtuin 1, FOXO3, which are part of our antioxidant response system. They decrease that, and it comes up all the time when we talk about inflammation, like the tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, and they upregulate the anti-inflammatory interleukin 10. And they also upregulate the precursor to irisin, which is a metabolic regulator, the FNDC5. The other really cool thing about them when you take them post workout There's starting to be some research accumulating that shows that they upregulate that hypoxia HIF-1A, which can improve production of erythropoietin. If you ever have like traumatic brain injury or you're getting ready to go into surgery, one of the best ways you can protect against that is going to be the ketone ester because it's giving your brain energy substrate it can metabolize when glucose metabolism might be impaired or there might be lack of oxygen. I personally take 6 shots a day. The other time that I think is really beneficial to take them is going to be I just do a half a serving before I go to sleep. And that sounds counterintuitive because we think about ketones as giving us energy, which they do. But when you take a half a capful before you go to sleep, it improves your NAD to NADH ratio, which is going to be your redox potential for the next day. And when we think about like NAD and we hear about how that gives us energy and everything, we want that high in the morning. It has some effects on our circadian rhythm. And also, that's going to be where we're getting the donation of electrons from for our cells. So we can really perform metabolically, it helps with DNA repair, so it's super important. But a side note on that, a lot of people are going and getting these NAD IVs these
Mm-hmm.
days, and I am adamantly opposed to that. And the reason for that is when we think about like getting this big dump of NAD in our system, when we have so we all have cancer cells and we all have senescent cells, and there's a receptor, the CD38 receptor, that is like a big NAD magnet, and it's really turned up on these cells. So when you get that dump of NAD, most of it's going to the wrong cells. And that's why, like, a lot of times people get a NAD IV and they're like, they get that kind of flush feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
That's actually their senescent cells sucking up the NAD, and definitely not a good thing. And they feel better the day after because that little bit of NAD that didn't get used up by all the wrong cells is dripping into them. But a better approach, and this is another peptide we can talk about, would be using like what's called 5-amino 1-MQ, which
Hmm.
is a lot like alphabet soup.
Yeah.
But 5-amino 1-MQ, what it does that's a little bit different, when we think about NAD, it gets metabolized by this enzyme called NNMT. And NNMT, when the levels are high of that, that's also associated with fibrosis. So the 5-amino 1-MQ decreases the NNMT. So the NAD that we're naturally making, like when we do our ketones at night and improving redox potential, lasts longer. And when it drips out slow, that gives all the good cells a chance to grab it instead of the bad cells. So more of it's getting diverted to where we want it to go. And you can even add to that effect, downregulate those CD38 receptors by taking 400 milligrams of apigenin at night,
Hmm.
hour before you go to sleep.
So that's a pretty high dose of apigenin, which I think is from chamomile, which can also help with sleep onset and sleep architecture. Is that correct?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's the only reason the dose is so high is because it's got really poor bioavailability.
Mm.
And if you are doing anything to improve NAD production, you just want to be aware of those CD38 receptors. So the little extra buffer in there is not going to hurt.
I'll come back to a bunch of different things here, which is great.
Sure.
Do you think NAD supplements are beneficial? Like I'm thinking of NR and NMN. I took a high dose of NR, like 2 grams a day for almost like 7 weeks. And honestly, I didn't notice anything other than it was very expensive.
Atrophy of the wallet.
Yeah, yeah. Wallet atrophy for sure on that one. But I may have procured some of it from a company who left it out on their table after hours at a conference. So possibly that might have happened.
I guess to answer your question, I think that the NR can raise NAD levels. If you were going to do something to raise NAD levels, that would be the best choice to make. But to your point, I don't think that's necessarily the most effective strategy. I think if you do something either that targets that NNMT enzyme, like the 5-amino 1-MQ, or there's a nutrition supplement, it's a new one a lot of people probably haven't heard of, and it's called 1-MNA.
Hmm.
And what that is, it's a metabolite that modulates that SIRT1 activity.
Oh,
It
interesting.
also enhances endothelial function, reduces oxidative stress, and has some cardiovascular protection,
Hmm.
improves mitochondrial function, and essentially it's like recycling your NAD. So you're getting more out of less is probably the easiest way to say it. It works through a couple different pathways. It upregulates the ENOS pathway, so you're getting that nitric oxide benefit. As I mentioned, the sirtuin 1, which is associated with like longevity and mitochondrial function, and acts directly on the NRF2 antioxidant response system. So I think, in my opinion, like that and the 5-amino 1-MQ are going to be the two best options. If you have somebody that's playing college sports or professional sports, I'm pretty sure the 5-amino 1-MQ is on the list, but the
Hmm.
1-MNA is not. So that would be the better choice. Or if you have anybody with like a lot of inflammation, the 1-MNA is going to be a great choice.
And you said the one M&A is available as a supplement, so that's oral, I would assume then?
Uh-huh. Yeah, they're both oral. Yeah, the 1-MNA is available as a supplement. I think the company that makes it, it's called like I think it's like endothelium or endo. It's sounds like endothelial. I can't think of the name of it right
Okay.
now, but I'll send it to you to put in the
Yeah,
notes.
no, that's great because I think wasn't it resveratrol was supposed to be like a certain one, and it's the research on that hasn't really panned out in humans from it's my interpretation. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, that's my understanding is David Sinclair's in a lot of trouble for the falsifying the research on the resveratrol and the NMN. And for resveratrol, like a low dose, like we're talking 50 milligrams, has some benefit. And resveratrol actually works on that downregulating that CD38 receptor we were
Hmm.
talking about too. So there's some benefit there. But as far as some of the claims that were made, I think they got a little carried away. And the other thing that you see a lot of times, like with resveratrol or just antioxidants in general, people over antioxidant. I
Sure.
think if you were to distill it down to the single most important thing when we're thinking about training, health, longevity, it's going to be that redox balance. And it's a delicate balance. And when we throw too many antioxidants in the mix, we're really doing ourselves a disservice.
Yeah, because I think there's, if I remember right, I don't think NAC did this, or I hate to say more natural mixed flavonoids, but like high dose C, high dose E, some of those, even I think in humans now, I believe the earlier stuff was in mice, but shows may not be beneficial for full like hypertrophy adaptations. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. When we work out, that initial inflammatory response is important. And something that's pretty interesting, I'm sure you're already aware of, some of the listeners, this might be new news too. When we talk about interleukin 6, we have one that's made as a result from exercise, and that's a
Hmm.
good thing. And then we have one that's made like when we get sick, like cytokine storm, and they're both interleukin 6, they're both identical, but somehow our body knows the one we make from exercise kind of signals this whole favorable cascade of events, and the other one absolutely doesn't. We want to keep that low. And to your point, when you take these really high doses of antioxidants post workout and you don't have a chance to have that initial inflammatory signaling, body kind of forgets it's supposed to repair.
Yeah, it because people forget that those ROS are also signaling molecules. If
Hmm.
we could extinguish that signaling, you're actually dampening down the signal that you spent all that time in the gym trying to create to get all the other cool effects downstream from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Another one I like in that area too is astaxanthin.
Oh, yeah.
It's a red carotenoid. And what's interesting about it is it appears to get to a lot of different cells and doesn't seem to have negative effects on exercise, might even help exercise. And it doesn't seem to spin off many pro-oxidants either. Because, like you were saying, sometimes like vitamin C, high doses, which again, this is highly debatable, that maybe some of the effects are from the pro-oxidants that are created, and the body response is creating something to mount against the pro-oxidant. So the pro-oxidant maybe had a positive effect. But astaxanthin doesn't seem to build up a lot of pro-oxidants per se.
Yeah, and it seems to have direct benefits in the eye as well, which I'm
Yeah, for
always
eye fatigue.
interested in.
Yeah,
I feel like my glasses need glasses some days.
yeah. Very cool. We cycle back to the ketones. Like, what kind of doses are you using? And I'm trying to remember. So, KetoneAid, is that the BHB molecule? And then is it bonded to
Uh-huh.
1,3-butane-diol? Is that the other
Yep.
component?
Yeah, the 1,3-butane diol. And it's the ketone aid. They have the ketone shot, which I tell people so the ketone shot and the ketone KE4 concentrate are the exact same 1,3-butane diol. Difference is the ketone shot tastes better. I've had some clients I before because I'll take anything if it improves performance. I don't really care about the taste.
Yeah. The
And
taste of those is horrible.
I forgot about that, and I'd recommended them to a couple people I work with, and they were like, "Did we do something to make you angry?" And I was like, "No, I'm just numb to it." But a cool trick you can do with if you do choose to do the concentrate, there's something you get on Amazon. It's called Miracle Berry,
Hmm.
and put
Oh,
that in
yeah,
your mouth
yeah.
with the shots, and it'll mask the taste. But to answer your question about doses, what I do first thing in the morning when I wake up, I usually wake up around 4 a.m. I'm an early riser, and I'll do one of the ketone shots, which is 5 grams of ketones. There's two servings in there. Each one has 2.5 grams of ketones. Then usually around 7:30, I eat breakfast. Then I'll generally have some client meetings, end up having my next meal right around 11. If I feel like I'm getting a dip in energy mid-afternoon, I would do another ketone shot, so another two servings, and then a ketone shot before I go to sleep, another two servings. So that would be 6 servings total. Now, on days that I train, in addition to that, what I do is 45 minutes before my workout, I take a ketone shot. And then 30 minutes before my workout, I do a combination of 8 grams of citrulline, 10 grams of arginine alpha ketoglutarate, bicarbonate. I stocked up on the Alka-Seltzer Gold while you could still get it. And I'll throw about 2 grams of carnosine in there and
Beta-alanine, but actually carnosine.
carnosine. Yep. And that's my pre-workout. And then immediately after the workout, I'll drink another full ketone shot, so another 5 grams. And that's gonna help keep the insulin levels elevated a little bit. So then 30 minutes later, when I take my large protein shake, which includes 3 scoops of UCAN, 2 scoops of the Designs for Health beef hydrolysate, 10 grams of type 2 collagen, 2 grams of taurine, 5 grams of colostrum, 5 grams of lactoferrin. And then I do a tablespoon, and I'm a little anal retentive about this, a wood or a plastic tablespoon of Manuka honey for the
Hmm.
benefits of the probiotics and enzymes.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're checking a lot of boxes with that formula. Additionally, like for people that like to have some type of carbohydrate before a workout, the one that I would use, and I do this usually on like a leg day or like a larger muscle group day, is I'll add in 10 grams of trehalose.
Oh, yeah.
And
Huh.
yeah, it's really cool sugar. It can improve insulin sensitivity. It has some autophagy boosting properties. It can work as an antioxidant, and it can be an AMPK activator as well. So neat thing to throw in your pre-workout if you need a little bit of carbs in there.
Oh, that's cool. And what are your thoughts about the 1,3-butane-diol by itself? Because I won't name any names of other companies, but other companies sell that as a ketone precursor. And, my bias, again, I have a disclosure with a ketone company, but at one or two doses, I'm like, okay, yeah, not too bad. At a higher dose, like, I'm definitely personally not training. I feel a little like, hey, I've just been at the bar a little bit. I feel more that end of the spectrum, not like, I want to go train.
Yeah, with the ones where essentially like the ketone aid is kind of the mixture, so you get that one that sort of releases fast and the one that releases a little bit slower.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, that's going to be a better fit. Sometimes when you get the ones that are just dumped in there, it can actually have a work as a central nervous system depressant. So it can make you a little kind of like, oh, I think I'm just going to sit on the couch today.
Yeah. Yeah.
The KetoneAid sells the hard ketones,
Mm,
and
yeah.
actually a cool trick, like if you have anybody that's trying to quit drinking, you can swap out those hard ketones with alcohol, and it'll give them some of the same like sedative effects that they'd get from alcohol, and a lot better option.
Yeah, because the 1,3-butane-diol actually does get converted to ketones, then it goes down an alcohol diol pathway too. So it makes sense at high enough doses, which I find it interesting that Franca KetoneAid has that as an alcohol alternative, and then HVMN has it as a performance enhancement. And full disclosure, I work for another company, which is Teton. So they have the BHB molecule bonded to glycerol. And so with that, you still get the ketone ester. You can still get high doses, but you don't have the 1,3-butane-diol at all. It just gets metabolized
Huh,
into the glycerol pathway, which again, I'm biased. I have disclosure. I do scientific advisement for them. I'm an ambassador. So I'm biased in that direction, but they have some very interesting data that'll be out soon showing that they have a very interesting curve where it doesn't get super high blood levels, but it doesn't appear to show up in the urine. So it's going
hmm,
somewhere, which we don't know where yet. They're paying for a bunch of tracer studies to try to figure that out. But in theory, maybe it's being used more by neural tissue, cardiac tissue. I don't know. So yeah, that's been fascinating.
that's really cool. I'll have to dig into some of the
Yeah,
research
I'll
on
send you a
that.
bunch of their info.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'd love to.
Have you found any sort of CNS effect at a higher dose? And again, I've only done this with the BHB glycerol mix, and I did it by accident. So I noticed like 10 grams, I feel a little bit better. Cognitive stuff definitely can be improved. 20 grams, that for me is a more of a sweet spot. And a couple of times I've gone up to 30 grams and done it during more of a grip intensive session where my session starting off, I had gone past my warm up. And usually I just did this one day just out of just trying shit to see what happens. And I had 2 cans and I thought for sure, like, this is just a throwaway session because I had it during the training. And I'm like, hey, I got like 95% of my PR on a session I thought I wasn't going to barely do anything. And then I did it again. Same thing happened again. And then the last time I did my testing, I was like, well, let me just do 30 grams to see what happens. And I almost got a PR on it. So
Huh.
I don't know. It's one of those things where it's happened enough times anecdotally. There's zero data I can find published in this realm. But maybe if it's having some CNS effect, you're providing more energy to your brain, maybe there's some different ergogenic performance thing there. I don't know. I haven't found any research on that.
Seems like there could be. Yeah, I'd be really interested to follow up on that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super cool. And I think I cut you off. You're on your desert island with your peptides, and you've got a couple more, right?
Yeah. So I have my thymosin alpha one, I have my ketone ester that we talked about, and the third one is zeolite. And
Yeah. Tell us about that.
zeolite, it comes from volcanic ash, and it's like if you look at it, it's shaped like a cage almost, and it traps like metals. It can get rid of like viruses, molds, pretty much anything you wouldn't want, it can trap it in there. Now, the important thing is if you're taking any sort of oral supplements or medications, needs to be at least 2 hours away, or else it's going to bind those up. But I've unbelievably had mercury poisoning twice, and
Whoa, how the hell that happened? I feel like there's at
oh
least
man,
one good story.
oh, there absolutely is. So I was this was first time 2019 April. I'm grilling out and like grilling some seafood. It's delicious. I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. I usually eat 4 times a day, and it went from fish like once a day to fish 4 times a day. And I was always really responsible about, picking the fresh stuff, well sourced, and seems like I'm checking all the boxes. And we were waiting on our home to be built, so we were in these apartments that were in reasonably close proximity to railroad tracks, and the fumes from railroads are really high in methyl mercury. So
Mm.
between eating fish 4 times a day and these fumes, like come October, like I, when I was growing up, I had a photographic memory and I've always processed things pretty fast, but it was noticeably slower. I was waking up like 17 times during the evening to pee,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
I was getting like a tingling through my fingers. It was crazy. So I go in to see Dr. Serrano, and you'll appreciate this knowing him. So we're talking, and I'm describing these symptoms to him, and he's like, "Are you taking some stupid peptides?" And I'm like, "No, it's got nothing to do with that." I'm
Are
like,
you
"I
eating
haven't
stupid
changed a
amounts of
thing."
fish per week, Anthony?
So he orders up my test, and I was like, "Maybe we should check for mercury poisoning." He's like, "It's really rare. Why do you think you'd have mercury poisoning?" I'm like, "Well, been eating fish 4 times a day since April." He's like, we'll censor it, of course, for
That's all right.
but he's like, "You're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?" And I was like, "Well, you told me fish was good for me and like the way it tastes." He's like, "Oh," he's like, "We're testing for mercury."
They
Sure
just
enough,
shake his head and go, I enjoy you eat it like fucking 4 times a day, for Christ's sake.
that is exactly what he did.
Yeah, I'm getting
And
pretty good at my Serrano impression.
yeah, the mercury
I love
levels came
Serrano.
back. He is fantastic. I wouldn't be where I am without him.
Yeah.
Mercury levels came back 25.4, and the normal is supposed to be 4. So,
Woo!
yeah, not needless to say, not a good thing. And then, so I got those cleared out. And then recently, it was actually just this last December, they were back up to 19 and haven't figured out because
Hmm.
obviously after that first encounter, I've been more mindful about seafood intake. I think that it might have been like could have been some bad fish oils or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
especially, correct me if I'm wrong, is usually pretty good nowadays, but definitely could be.
yeah, I think well, what I've done with the fish oil, just to err on the side of caution, is I use the plasmalogens. I use a high dose of plasmalogens, and I use it's called Fatty 15. It's a pentadecanoic acid, and then I just take 2 krill oil a day, which is going to have the antioxidant we were talking about that I can never pronounce.
Yeah, for
And
astaxanthin, yeah. There's some in there because of the red color.
yep, and the with it being in phospholipid form, it's going to
Yep.
be easier to absorb. And those plasmalogens, really, when we think about like a lot of the benefits that we're going to be getting from fish oils, plasmalogens are a lot more bang for the buck. In fact, there's a really cool test you can do. It's called the prodrome scan, and it's the only test I'm aware of that measures the functionality of like your heart, your brain, everything. This biochemist, Dr. Dan Goodenow, did a huge sample of data, research dating back to the 80s, and looked at people that are healthy and their plasmalogen levels in all sorts of different tissue. And essentially, there's like the DHA precursor plasmalogens, which are the plasmalogen neuro.
Hmm.
And then there's the omega 9, which are the plasmalogen glia. Easy way to think about it like repair, neuro, decreasing inflammation, glia. That's an oversimplification. But, anyways, when you do this test, it'll show you how things like your heart, your brain, mitochondria, all that stuff, how much plasmalogens you're using in those areas. And by looking at the different ratios, you can project health to almost 100% accuracy.
Hmm.
And then the beauty of it is you can simply supplement these plasmalogens according to what you're deficient in. You can measure the restoration of health. And not only do you have like the objective measure from that prodrome scan, but like speaking N of one, like I can genuinely say, after going through the mercury poisoning, knowing how my memory had declined and seeing where it is now, it's better than it was before, and really some benefit there. I do it about once a year. I think it's a good thing to keep an eye on, and I'm a numbers guy, so I like to see where things are trending.
Yeah, any info you have on that, we'll definitely stick in the show notes. That's super cool. I want to check into that because I'm not familiar with that at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what kind of dose for zeolites, if they're what a person use? And then out of curiosity, what dose did you use for the mercury stuff?
So with the zeolites, the brand that I'm aware of that most of the research has been done on is the Med Therapy Pro by Panacea. The problem is they're based overseas and it
Mm.
takes 30 days to the day to get your shipment in. So I learned the hard way. I order like 12 at a time now. But to answer your question about the dose, a good idea is starting with 1 scoop. And
And one
then
scoop is what comes in there, like whatever they
mhm,
standardize that to.
yeah, and then after like a couple days, most people are gonna be doing fine. Go up to 2 scoops, and for me, I worked up to 3 scoops to detox the mercury. The one thing you have to watch with zeolite, because it comes from volcanic ash, it's a binder. If it's not well sourced, it could be binding metals. So ironically,
Hmm.
you could be putting metal in your system.
Hmm.
So it's really important to make sure you're using a good zeolite.
Ah, interesting. That's awesome. And I know we made it this far without actually even talking directly about Thymosin Beta-4, BPC. Like, I've had other people use those off and on for, God, probably going on 7 years now. In the
Uh-huh.
past, I've linked to the podcast that I've had with Dr. Andy Galpin and my buddy Dr. Ryan Green talking about peptides several years ago now. And I've had clients who we went through a physician, we got a good source, like he verified the source, like he used them all the time, like solid protocol. And like, I don't know, maybe 50, 60% of the time, clients are like, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing that has ever been done. Like 40% of the time was like, I don't know, I can't tell any difference at all. And again, wide variety, anecdotal, like using them for everything from tennis elbow to knee pain to there's nothing really standardized with the population I could figure out other than yeah, everyone was getting, as far as I know, like legitimate like source material, like following a decent protocol, which I know depending on where you order stuff from now, God knows what you may or may not get, but
Yeah, it's really important to go through a compounding pharmacy so you know what you're getting. But one explanation for that, actually a couple explanations for that, I think that when we think about kind of mechanism of action and what they're setting us up to do and aligning that collagen, there has to be collagen there. So I think sometimes when people take those, really to get the best results possible, it's a really good idea to use like a type 2 collagen. And then I also, if it's for tennis elbow, I'll have people use the collagen peptide Tendo Forte and the Fortigel in addition. And the one I get, and my friends all tease me about this when I tell them to buy it. They're like, all right, it's called Sparkle. So, yeah, you can imagine I get teased about that. But the Sparkle brand has like a little bit of vitamin C in there to help with the
hmm
collagen synthesis and the
yeah.
Tendo Forte and Fortigel, and it tastes good. So I
Hmm.
can handle the teasing. The other thing, and this one always flies under the radar, I think people forget how important it is to hydrate. That when we think about like how a peptide works, the way a peptide works, it's a signaling molecule. And when I talk to people about what does hydration mean to you, generally the answers I get are, well, I need to drink water, or I drink my water, I put some electrolytes, minerals in there. Those are all good things, but when we're talking about the kind of hydration that's going to make it possible for a cell to do its job, we want to think in terms of cell volume. An easy way to contextualize that is like if we think about creatine, first time we took creatine, we get that cell swelling. And when we get that cell swelling, that cell volume, what happens is we're polarizing the cell. And the way I explain that to people to make it a little more digestible, it's just like if I go buy a satellite TV for my house and I stick it on my roof, and I can't remember, I think it's supposed to be pointing like southwest or something. So I got it pointing the right direction. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
We'll go
getting all
Southwest.
getting all 200 channels. Now, if that same satellite, for some reason, I'm like, oh, I got a satellite, I just got to attach it to the house. I stick it out my window facing the ground, I might get 13 channels. And so it's really important the antenna is pointing where it needs to be. And when we have a volumized cell, we're accomplishing that. And the best way to do that is through use of neutral osmolytes. And when we think about neutral osmolytes, like which ones would we want to use? Generally, I'll do a combination of creatine, alanine, glycine, glutamine, and a low dose of leucine. And one of the
Hmm.
kind of cool things about low dose leucine, we know high dose of leucine stimulates protein synthesis, mTOR. On the other end of the spectrum, if you do 1.5 grams or less, it actually can stimulate the sirtuitin 1 and AMPK pathway. So, really good way to maintain that mTOR AMPK balance. It's so important for people. And just to break that down a little bit before I go on, when I talk about the balance of mTOR and AMPK, a lot of people think, especially like I always want to put on muscle. So I'm like, why would I ever want anything other than mTOR? And what happens if we're in this build state, we forget that during AMPK, that's when our cell does the cleanup. It gets rid of the debris it doesn't need, increases insulin sensitivity, and maintains that metabolic flexibility that's going to be important. So if we're in an mTOR dominant state all the time and we become more glycolytic, we're not making as many ATP and we're going to become insulin resistant and can lead to some other problems. In fact, might be a good segue into like the difference between GHRHs and growth hormone. But yeah, long story short, those neutral osmolytes, when we're thinking about hydration, that's the combination, and you can buy it as a formula. It's called I Cell Water, like a little I and then word cell
Hmm.
water, or you can get the ingredient to make it. The credit goes to Dr. Seeds on that one. It's his,
Interesting.
drink. And what's a little bit different about it too, so you mix this formula in a half a gallon of water and you sip it all through the day. Normally, like if we have a glass of water, we just drink it down. But this, what you want to do is you just sip it throughout the day. So I'll mix up 2 servings of that. I sip it throughout the day in addition to my regular fluid intake. And it's fantastic. You get more out of less with your peptides or really anything
Hmm.
that's working through a signaling mechanism. You can measure the improvements in hydration if you have access to something like InBody 970, where they can show you
Yep.
body water
Total
and where
body
it's
water. Yeah,
compartmented.
yeah.
And yeah, I feel like that's a real low-hanging fruit
Hmm.
and explains a lot when I see people that aren't getting results with like BPC, thymosin, or peptides in general. Almost always, and I most of the time see it with the GLPs, almost always they're dehydrated and we just get some water in them and they're like, oh, I guess these are working.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, because there's very little human research on peptides. So we're left with animal mechanistic kind of stuff and people like
Yeah.
yourself who have a lot of experience with them. And like if you talk to researchers like Dr. Keith Barr, who's done a lot of work on collagen and tendons and stuff, he's like, yeah, we put a whole bunch of it in our engineered ligaments and the BPC didn't do anything. But you still have anecdotal reports of people seeing miraculous changes. I may know of people who may have done things like insulin pumps to drive it into a tissue in pretty high doses and stuff like that. Not saying I recommend that, but this may have happened at a level. And then you go to look at the research and you're like, I don't know. So the study I want done is BPC-157, saline injection, pick your thing, tennis elbow, whatever it is, running for like 8 weeks. I would settle with like the first study to see does it really, air quotes, move the needle and what things it's most effective for. But in the meantime, it just feels like we're in this sort of weird area of, I think there's something there. And all this was my question of, you mentioned more about inflammation signaling and everything else. Do you think it's maybe it doesn't have as much of a direct effect as what we think, but because we have all these other beneficial effects with inflammation and other changes of other regulators, that a side effect maybe is that it does appear to increase tendon health and that type of thing in terms of mechanistic play?
I think that I guess I feel like it is in fact affecting the inflammation. I think another factor that kind of comes into play when we think about the dosing of these with like BPC, for instance, the saturation dose is 400 micrograms.
Hmm.
So if you, and it's got a short half-life, it's about 2.5 hours.
Hmm.
So if you have somebody that's taking like a ton of BPC and they're like, oh, I didn't get that much out of it, it doesn't mean that after 400 micrograms you don't use any of it. You're using considerably less of it. And if
Right.
you were to do like 250 micrograms 4 times a day versus I don't know, 1200 micro or 1.2 milligrams twice a day, you'd actually get more out of the 250 4 times a day just because of that saturation point and the half-life. And or my theory would be that you're suppressing those inflammatory factors more consistently that way than if you do kind of like in the morning or in the evening. And then when we think about thymosin beta 4, the same thing, these peptides have really short half lives. So the timing of them becomes important, and then making sure that we've laid the groundwork for good cell signaling with the hydration and having the collagen present so that when we go to build that house, we've got the lumber and beams and everything we need.
Yeah, and I also think of isometric loading, which is a lot of Keith Barr stuff. Try to reduce stress shielding around the areas and holding isometrics for a longer period of time so we can get the stress signal to go through and target kind of the area we want to repair. It's probably a big factor of that too.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to, I think people would see a lot of benefit combining that type of thing with small frequent doses and the hydration. I think that's where when we look at like the people that are like, wow, this was miraculous, really healed up versus the people that are like, I was a little underwhelmed. I feel like if we were to fine tune those protocols for them, that could really be the difference maker, assuming they're all good source and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I may have had a client who got a prescription for it. He had some knee pain. We've worked around it, got it pretty good, but not quite gone entirely. Busy professional. And he waited and he finally did the injection. It was a site injection. And then he forgot that he took it. And the next day he woke up and he's like, oh my God, went to play a sport. And he's like, my knee pain's so much better. And I said, well, is there anything different? And then he's like, oh yeah, I started doing the BPC. I think it was BPC and Thymosin Beta-4. As we were
Mhm.
just talking about it. And he may have injected 10 times the dose that was prescribed to him.
Whoops.
He got his dilution wrong a little bit there.
Yeah,
But he's like, but I felt so much better. I was like,
yeah. Can't argue with results.
yeah. So you hear weird stuff like that too, where you're like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things is we're starting to accumulate more human data. There's enough doctors now that are using them and records are being recorded that I think, especially like when we factor in what AI is capable of and
Yeah.
compiling large amounts of data, I feel like we're going to have some pretty clear answers in next couple years and sufficient amount of human research that we can make some more definitive statements.
Yeah. Last question as we wrap up. I can talk to you about this stuff forever, but if someone is thinking that, okay, I'm going to look at some bioregulators, I'm going to look at some peptides, we went through a lot of different options. There's so many new vendors, new places popping up here. Like, what are some things that people should look out for? Obviously, there's a lot of research that says some of these companies don't even have any peptides in it. If you are doing something that is an injection, for God's sake, I hope it's sterile because you can run into all sorts of issues with just not even having material there, but injecting something that's not sterile. So, how can people get a hold of you? I know you do consults, I know you do consulting, everything else, all the above.
Absolutely. I try to be pretty active on Instagram. It's just at Anthony Castor. And I'm the first non-physician fellow for the SSRP, Seed Scientific and Research Performance. I'll
Hmm.
be lecturing this year at the Peptide World Congress, which is going to be in Vegas in June at the Wynn. It
Oh,
is
very
going to be
cool.
awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited about it. This year is really going to be our biggest year yet. We had like 800 people there last year. We're
Wow, that's a
expecting
lot.
over 1,000,
Damn.
and it is cool. It's like 2 days of how the Swiss conference is set up. How you have
Yeah,
these
I love
streams.
Swiss.
Yeah, so it's like a Swiss conference for peptides.
Nice.
And in addition to that, this year we're going to be expanding the platform to include like some business stuff and some strength training stuff. So the lecture that I give, I think for any strength coaches that are interested in getting into this space, and my goal is really to bridge that gap between the medical world and the training world. I'm going to be presenting a case study. A guy came to me, 240 pounds, 28% body fat. 6 months later, 210 and 10.1% body fat.
Oh, damn.
And
That's a big
um,
difference.
the credit goes to him. He did the work, but it just with this case study, I'm going to illustrate how when we think about what the training stimulus is, the pathways involved, the mechanism of action, and we're using the precise amounts of the correct peptides to support that program and nutrition supplements, these kind of transformations are possible and going to explain the architecture of thought so that people can. My goal is people on Monday morning can start writing effective peptide protocols and pairing them with whatever type of strength training they're working on and think it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm really excited about it.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, we'll stick all that info in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for all your time and just really sharing all your expertise and all your knowledge and being so open with everything. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I'm a fan of your work, so it's an honor to be
Oh,
on your
thank you.
show. And I've enjoyed your podcast and your teaching. So, yeah, it's really humbling being on here. And any of the listeners, if you have questions, I'm somebody that probably asks more questions than anybody I know. So I love answering questions, giving back any way I can. So please reach out and happy to help however I'm able.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Huge thanks to him for being on the podcast. Check out our sponsors if you're looking for ketone esters. My favorite is Teton. You can have a link there down below. I'll look for a big announcement from them coming up, probably might be May or June timeframe. As soon as it's public knowledge, I will let all of you. For electrolytes, check out my friends over at Element. We'll have a link down there below for them also. So again, thanks to Anthony for being on the podcast. Huge thanks to you for listening to the podcast. If you find this one useful and you want to send it to someone, please send it to them or share it around on social media. Make sure to tag myself and Anthony so we can say thank you for sharing the podcast. And we will have many more special guests coming up. So stay tuned. And then if you can even leave us a whatever stars you think is appropriate, and download, subscribe, like, leave a review. All that wonderful stuff helps us get better distribution of the podcast so we can keep bringing you top level guests. Thank you so much. Talk to all of you next week.
What do you suppose they call that? A novelty act?
I don't know, but it wasn't too bad.
Well, that's a novelty.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.